2 American military aircraft are down. 1 United States service member is missing somewhere inside Iranian territory. And oil just crossed $109 a barrel. This is not a drill. This is week 5 of a war that is rapidly spinning beyond anyone's ability to predict or control. And right now, the Middle East is on fire in ways that will reshape your cost of living, the balance of global power, and the future of a region that sits at the center of the world's energy supply. Let's go back to the beginning of this week so you understand how we got here, because the events of the last 48 hours did not come out of nowhere. On Wednesday of this week, United States forces conducted airstrikes that destroyed one of the largest bridges in Iran, the B1 bridge connecting the capital Tehran to the nearby city of Karaj. The bridge was still under construction when the bombs hit. Iranian state media reported 13 people were killed in that strike. President Trump then took to social media to celebrate the destruction personally, posting that the biggest bridge in Iran had come tumbling down and that, in his words, much more would follow. He continued threatening Iran's electrical power grid and other major infrastructure in a series of social media posts that made clear the United States intended to escalate rather than de-escalate. Trump's messaging throughout this week has been defiant and sweeping, with the president declaring that American forces had beaten and completely decimated Iran and that the war would be finished very fast. Then came Friday, and everything changed. An F-15 fighter jet went down inside Iran, and a second United States Air Force combat plane crashed near the Strait of Hormuz, capping off another week of intensified fighting in the conflict. NPR, these were not accidents, these were combat losses. And they happened just 48 hours after the President of the United States stood in front of the nation and declared that Iran had been defeated. It was the first time the United States has lost aircraft in Iranian territory during this conflict, and it marks a new level of pressure being placed on American military forces. KPBS let that sink in for a moment. Day 35 of this war, and for the first time, Iran brought down an American plane inside its own borders. The implications of that alone are enormous. Here is what we know about what happened based on reporting from CBS News, CNN, NBC News, NPNP, and other verified outlets. An F-15E Strike Eagle was downed over Iran. One of the crew members aboard was rescued during a search and rescue operation by United States forces. The status of the other crew member, a weapons systems officer, remains unclear. CNN, while American helicopters were conducting that search and rescue mission inside Iran, they came under fire. The helicopter carrying the recovered pilot was hit by small arms fire, wounding crew members aboard. Though the helicopter landed safely, CBS News video verified by NBC News showed armed men on the ground in southwestern Iran firing at low-flying American helicopters as they passed overhead, and it did not stop there. A second United States military plane, an A-10 Thunderbolt II, was struck by Iran on Friday, forcing the pilot to eject. The pilot was able to navigate the aircraft out of Iranian airspace before ejecting over the Persian Gulf, and was subsequently rescued. CNN. So within a single day, the United States lost 2 aircraft in combat, had helicopters hit by ground fire, and is still searching for at least 1 missing service member whose fate remains unknown as of this broadcast. Now let's talk about what Iran did on the ground, because this conflict is not just being fought in the skies. Kuwait's largest oil refinery, the Mina Al Ahmadi facility, was hit by Iranian drones, setting several units on fire. Emergency crews worked to contain the blazes and no injuries were reported there. However, Kuwait's army also confirmed its air defense systems were responding to hostile missiles and drone threats throughout the day. NPR, that refinery is one of the largest in the entire region, and its disruption sends shockwaves through the global energy market immediately. Kuwait also confirmed that an Iranian attack caused significant damage to a desalination plant. These plants are responsible for the majority of drinking water throughout Gulf states, and they have become a major target throughout this war. CBS News, think about what that means. Iran is not just targeting military assets. Iran is targeting the infrastructure that provides drinking water to millions of people across Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, and beyond. Authorities in the United Arab Emirates shut down a gas field after falling debris from a missile interception caused a fire. Saudi Arabia said it intercepted and destroyed several Iranian drones. Sirens sounded in Bahrain. Israel reported incoming missiles. In Lebanon, an Israeli drone strike near Beirut killed 2 people during Friday prayers. Fortune, this is a region-wide conflict now. It is not contained. Every country in the Gulf is on alert. Every energy facility is a potential target, and the ripple effects are being felt by every single person on this planet who drives a car, heats a home, buys food, or pays for anything that requires fuel to produce or transport. Brent crude oil surged nearly 8% on Friday to around $109 per barrel, representing a total increase of roughly 50% since the war began in late February. WASF Public Media fertilizer prices are up. Gasoline prices are rising. And economists are now warning that if this continues, the global inflationary pressure that followed the pandemic could look mild by comparison. The Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago's president said publicly that before the war, he was confident the Fed could cut interest rates this year. That confidence has now waned significantly as oil prices continue to climb. CBS News. So how did we get into this war in the first place? The origins are layered and contested. Trump administration officials have offered multiple and shifting explanations for initiating the conflict, including preempting Iranian retaliation against United States assets after an expected Israeli attack, destroying Iran's missile and military capabilities, preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, securing Iranian oil resources, and achieving regime change by bringing the Iranian opposition to power. Wikipedia. That is a remarkably wide range of stated objectives, which is part of why critics both inside and outside the United States have questioned whether there is a coherent strategy at all. The International Atomic Energy Agency has stated that while Iran has an ambitious nuclear program and has refused to allow inspections of certain damaged sites, there was no evidence of a structured nuclear weapons program at the time this war began. Wikipedia. That finding has become a significant point of contention, because one of the primary stated justifications for military action was the nuclear threat. Even more startling is the diplomatic context. Just before the strikes began, Oman's foreign minister had announced that a breakthrough had been reached in negotiations, with Iran agreeing to never stockpile enriched uranium and to full verification by international inspectors. Peace was described as being within reach. Talks were scheduled to resume days later, after the United States, and Israel attacked that same diplomat, expressed dismay, and said the active negotiations had been undermined. Wikipedia, in other words, a diplomatic solution was reportedly on the table and was abandoned when military action began instead. The cost of the war in human terms is already staggering. More than 24 people have died in Gulf states and the occupied West Bank. 19 people have been reported dead in Israel. 13 United States service members have been killed. More than 1,300 people have been killed in Lebanon, and more than 1 million people have been displaced there. 10 Israeli soldiers have also died in Lebanon. KPBS. Now let's talk about what different sides are saying, because the narratives could not be more different depending on who is speaking. The Trump administration has maintained throughout that the war is going well and that Iran is being systematically destroyed. Just 2 days before the F-15 was shot down, the president stood in the White House and told the American people the military had beaten and completely decimated Iran. He specifically said in that address, referencing Iran's air defenses, that their radar was entirely eliminated. The very next day, Iran used what remained of those capabilities to shoot down an American fighter jet, strike 2 Black Hawk helicopters, and down an additional attack aircraft. NBC News. The gap between the administration's public statements and the events on the ground has become one of the defining tensions of this conflict. Iran's side of the ledger is defiant. The Speaker of Iran's parliament, who has emerged as one of the most powerful figures in the country since the assassination of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei in late February, openly mocked the United States' search for its missing crew members on social media. Iran's foreign minister stated publicly that targeting civilian infrastructure, including unfinished bridges, will not force Iranians to surrender. And rather than retreating, Iran escalated throughout the week, launching waves of drones and missiles at Israel, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the UAE, and Bahrain simultaneously. The strategic weapon that Iran holds most tightly is the Strait of Hormuz, the strait through which a fifth of the world's oil and natural gas transits in peacetime has been effectively closed by Iran in retaliation for the military campaign against it. The United Nations Security Council was expected to take up the matter, and world leaders have struggled to find a way to end Iran's stranglehold on the waterway, which has proven to be Tehran's greatest strategic advantage in the entire conflict. KPBS French President Emmanuel Macron said that using military force to reopen the strait, as suggested by Trump, is unrealistic because it would leave cargo ships inside the strait vulnerable to Iranian attacks. South Korean and French leaders said they would cooperate to reopen the waterway through diplomatic means. Dozens of countries launched renewed efforts to negotiate the strait's reopening, though the United States and Israel were not among them. Texas Public Radio Europe's relationship with this war is becoming increasingly fractured. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, normally considered one of Trump's closest European allies, publicly stated that she disagrees with the United States position. Traveling to Saudi Arabia to secure energy supplies for Italy, Meloni said the Italian economy was feeling the strain of the war, and that when her government disagrees with an ally, it must say so. Italy had previously blocked a United States aircraft from using a military base in Sicily. CNN, when even Italy is publicly breaking from the administration, the diplomatic isolation of the United States on this issue is, Beck, calming undeniable. The defense budget request released this same week adds another dimension to this story. White House is seeking roughly $1.5 trillion for defense in the fiscal year 2027 budget proposal, which would represent more than a 40% increase compared to last year and would push military spending to its highest level in modern history. The budget would fund munitions, expand the naval fleet, begin construction of a missile defense system the president calls the Golden Dome, and include pay raises of between 5 and 7% for military personnel. CNN, meanwhile, Trump's own public statements about the war's objectives have veered into territory that has surprised foreign policy analysts. On Friday, the president posted on social media suggesting he wanted to open the Strait of Hormuz, take the oil, and make a fortune. He then followed that with another post asking if anyone wants to keep the oil. These statements, made publicly during an active military conflict, have raised questions among international observers about whether the United States is pursuing security objectives or something closer to resource extraction. The economic consequences are spreading far beyond the Middle East. Pakistan announced it was sharply increasing consumer prices for gasoline and diesel for the second time in less than a month, directly attributing the increases to the Iran war's impact on oil costs. NBC News across Asia and Europe, governments are scrambling to find alternative energy arrangements as the disruption to Gulf supplies continues. The longer the Strait of Hormuz remains restricted, the deeper these economic wounds cut. What happens next is genuinely uncertain, and that uncertainty itself is part of the story. The United Nations Security Council was preparing to take up the Strait of Hormuz situation, and military planners fro. And multiple countries were set to meet the following week to discuss defensive capabilities for protecting the strait once fighting subsides. Wikipedia, but fighting has not subsided. It has intensified with each passing week, and this week produced the most dramatic single day of the entire conflict, with 2 aircraft downed, 3 more damaged, a missing service member, and refinery fires burning across the Gulf. The question of what victory looks like in this war remains unanswered. The Trump administration began with talk of regime change and nuclear disarmament, then pivoted to talking about oil, then to infrastructure destruction. Iran, for its part, has demonstrated that despite weeks of relentless bombing, it retains the ability to shoot down American jets, launch hundreds of drones and missiles simultaneously, and keep one of the world's most critical waterways effectively closed. Neither side shows any sign of blinking. For ordinary people around the world, the consequences arrive quietly but unmistakably. It is the price at the gas pump. It is the grocery bill. It is the interest rate that doesn't come down. It is the traveler who cannot transit through the region. It is the sailor among the 20,000 reportedly stranded on ships in or near the Strait of Hormuz. It is the Israeli civilian running toward a shelter on Good Friday instead of attending church. It is the Iranian family living near a bridge that no longer exists. This war is now 5 weeks old, and in week 5 alone we have seen the first American aircraft lost in Iranian airspace, oil cross $100 a barrel on its way higher, a continent of allies fracturing from Washington's position, and a missing service member whose fate is unknown. Week 6 begins tomorrow. If you found this breakdown valuable, share it with someone who needs to understand what is actually happening in the sea. Conflict beyond the headlines. The situation is moving fast, and the next update may change everything we think we know today. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think happens next? Does diplomacy find a way in, or does this escalate further? Subscribe so you don't miss a single update, because right now, every day matters.